Dear friends, today is a very special day for us, for Yalta European strategy. Today we will break tradition because it's our fifth dinner with a dinner speaker. 4 previous times we had distinguished guests from one country, from the United States of America. And I always had a dream to have somebody high level from Europe. And this year is a very special year for Ukraine. Even somebody advised, let's organize this Yalta European strategy in Brussels. But we thought, not, let's try to make something instead. Let's try to invite Brussels to Kiev, to Ukraine. And today we have great honor to have here highest person from European Union, President of European Commission, great friend of Ukraine, President Barroso. Please invite, please, floor is yours, President. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is a great pleasure to join you this year for this Yalta European Strategy annual meeting. Every year, this meeting makes a valuable contribution to addressing a wide range of regional challenges in the context of a fast-changing world. In just 1 year, Ukraine has lived through many key events. History was fast-forwarded with a popular uprising, people standing up for what they believed was right and just. But history was also rewound through Russia's actions, which clearly do not belong to this century and should be long buried in history books. The 1975 Helsinki Final Act established territorial integrity and human rights as central to European security order. Almost 40 years later, this consensus is being put to test. We are all in this world together, and only together, playing by the rules and not with the rules, we will be able to achieve freer, more tolerant, more prosperous, more inclusive societies for all of our citizens. The annexation of Crimea and the stabilization of eastern Ukraine was a blunt challenge to international law and order. It concerns not just Ukraine, but Europe as a whole and the wider international community. And as we met in Kiev, not far from Maidan, I want to thank the people of Ukraine for their great example. They clearly and courageously express their wish to take their future into their own hands. I have no words to describe what was my emotion, and the emotion of many in Europe, in Western Europe, when we saw European flags being waved in the center of Ukraine under freezing temperatures, the Ukrainian people demonstrating concretely why Europe is important for them, why they feel that they belong to Europe, and what Europe stands for. The Ukrainian people stood for democracy, freedom, rule of law. These are precisely the values at the core of the European Union. When 2 years ago, together with my colleagues of the European Union, I had the honor to receive, representing the European Union, the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo, it was, in fact, a recognition of the Nobel Committee about what the European Union means in terms of peace, but also in terms of our values of freedom and democracy. And I think the best demonstration of this is precisely the fact that Ukrainian people want to come closer to our union. And I want to say that I really believe that the European Union will always stand with countries willing to engage in this path of freedom and democracy. This is what we want for Ukraine. and what our relationship is about. To support Ukraine to become a more democratic and rule-governed country, a more prosperous and modern society. Ukraine deserves the same opportunities that were afforded to other countries in Eastern Europe after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Just look at the evolution of Ukraine and Poland these last decades. In 1990, Ukraine was ahead of Poland in GDP per capita, and at about the same level in some indicators. Only 20 years later, Polish indicators, both overall GDP and per capita GDP, are 3 times higher. And this transformation started to happen even before the accession of Poland. So the question is, if the Polish people could do it, why the Ukrainians cannot do it? Why cannot have the same opportunities as other people of Central or Eastern Europe? This was precisely the aim of our association agreement that was negotiated for more than 5 years and that will be ratified next week. This will be an historic moment. I've been living all these moments with great anxiety and with great commitment. I remember working with several presidents of Ukraine, and I know well how this was and is an inspiration of the Ukrainian people. The reality was that there were some people who did not want people outside Ukraine this to happen. And now they give some excuses. But let's be honest, our entire Eastern Partnership policy was public and transparent. We never designed our policies against anyone. We never sought an exclusive relationship. On the contrary, we in the European Union always encourage our Eastern partners to have good relations with their neighbors. I can give an example. The case of Armenia. This is a country which also negotiated an association agreement with the European Union, which initialed that agreement, but at the very last minute, under heavy pressure, they decided not to sign. Did we criticize that decision? Did we interrupt our trade? Did we punish Armenia? Did we adopt any measures against that country? Of course not. We respected Armenia's decision, even we regretted it, but we understood it. Unfortunately, what happened in the case of Ukraine was exactly the opposite. Ukraine wanted to sign. I spoke with different presidents, different prime ministers, many people in Ukraine during these 10 years I've been engaged in this matter. And there are no doubts that Ukraine, not only the Ukrainian government, the Ukrainian authorities, but Ukrainian society wants that agreement. But Ukraine wanted to sign, and eventually what happened was that Russia did not want Ukraine to sign. And this is a very important question that raises a problem, not only for Ukraine, but for all of us in Europe and in the world. Is it acceptable in the 21st century that a sovereign country, a permanent member of the United Nations, wants to sign an agreement and other big neighbor imposes its will on that country? I think it's not acceptable. And if we accept the principle that one country, because it's bigger or stronger militarily, can impose its will on the freedom of another country to sign the agreements that country wants, I mean, we are going for a very, very bad situation. The reality is that in spite of everything, eventually Ukraine has signed that agreement. Unfortunately, Russia did not respect that. It did not want Ukraine to choose its path freely or determine its own future. And of course, this could not be accepted. The rest of the story, it's unfortunately well known. I'm sure there were certainly excesses committed during the transition from the previous regime to the current one. But as history teaches us, Those who make peaceful transitions impossible, they make violent revolutions unavoidable. I came here to express our clear and unequivocal support to this country, to Ukraine. We owe it to the people of Ukraine. In these last months, the Commission has left no stone unturned to provide political, financial, economic and technical assistance to Ukraine. In early March, we promptly proposed an overall support package totaling 11 billion euros from the European budget and European Union-based financial institutions. We also immediately dispatched a team to identify the economic and financial needs of the Ukrainian authorities. 2 separate macro-financial assistance programs worth a total of 1.6 billion euros are now available to Ukraine. 600 million euros have already been disbursed. 760 million euros can be disbursed next month, provided some of the conditions are met, notably economic reforms and the fight against corruption. We have also concluded a state-building program worth 350 million euros in grants, of which 250 million euros have already been paid. And we are ready to consider further financial assistance. Just today, in a very productive meeting I had with President Poroshenko, I told him that. I welcome the fact that he's going now to put in the Rada the law against corruption, and I really hope that all the conditions are met for the European Union to increase macro financial assistance to Ukraine. So we are firmly committed to helping Ukraine cope with the economic consequences of the crisis. And we are also ready to host a donor conference at the end of this year. But while economic and financial assistance are essential, trade and investment are key instruments in helping secure long-term sustainability, economic sustainability for Ukraine. The unilateral trade measures proposed by the European Commission in April, even before the signature of the association agreement, are already delivering results. As you know, there is an unprecedented 14% increase in Ukraine exports to the European Union in recent months. This thanks to unilateral measures decided by the European Union. We are also committed to addressing the harsh humanitarian situation of those most affected by the conflict and to promoting social and economic development throughout Ukraine. This is why I can confirm this evening that we will provide an additional 22 million euros to support the Ukrainian authorities in these humanitarian efforts. Finally, we are also helping Ukraine to meet its energy needs. The Commission has made proposals to enable gas reverse flows from European Union member states, notably from Slovakia, Poland and Hungary. And they are now working. They are, however, not a substitute for an overall deal that we are also actively seeking. Ladies and gentlemen, obviously, this assistance is a very clear demonstration of concrete solidarity from the European Union to Ukraine. But this is not a quick fix. It needs to be complemented by a clear commitment on the Ukrainian side to continue political and economic reforms. Ukraine's best protection against any attempts to undermine its sovereignty is to build a strong democracy and a modern economy. Ukraine's goal should be to establish and reinforce a real, viable state, a democratic, modern state that is able to exert its sovereignty. And to be sustainable, Ukraine's reform efforts need to be inclusive. Despite Ukraine's difficult situation, it is of essence that the political reforms are based on a broad national dialogue. This is also an essential and indispensable part of finding a lasting political solution to the crisis. Key elements will be to move forward on reforms related to the Constitution. Also, I believe in the virtuality of decentralization in the sense of more inclusive decision-making process. And what is important is that all citizens of Ukraine feel proud of their country. Here again, the European Union will continue to support and assist. We have set up a permanent dedicated structure in the European Commission, the Ukraine Support Group, to assist the Ukrainian authorities delivering this agenda. But Ukraine's reform agenda must also be both much deeper and broader. It must go beyond the immediate crisis and help the country move into the future. Ukrainian politicians need to rise to the challenge. The bickering of the past did not enhance Ukraine's global standing. We hope that the upcoming elections will help boost this reform process. We know very well that elections by definition are divisive, polarizing, different political parties, debate, that's okay. But Ukraine is a very delicate situation. I hope that the political leaders in Ukraine, all of them, understand that at this moment, while of course promoting a democratic debate and open debate, it's very important that they show unity around the goals, the strategic goals of this country. To show division inside Ukraine will be a great prize given to those that want to recognize Ukraine's sovereignty and independence. The fact is that consolidation of Ukraine's independence and sovereignty depends ultimately on the country's political stability, economic viability. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here in Kiev at a moment when Ukraine might be turning the tide against a conflict which has cost already too many lives in the eastern part of this country. This includes the death of all the 298 people on board Malaysian Airlines flight MH17, shot down in July. No more blood should be shed. The European Union has always advocated a negotiated and peaceful outcome to the current crisis. I believe that any claims or concerns should be resolved politically, through political means. We hope that the ceasefire agreement reached last Friday will be a first step, I say first step, towards such a sustainable political solution based on respect for Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, unity and independence. And we stand ready to support any efforts related to the implementation of this ceasefire. Let me, in this regard, commend the Ukrainian authorities and President Poroshenko for their patience and persistent readiness to engage in diplomatic talks, despite being confronted with recurrent escalation of the conflict. We are, of course, well aware of the fragility of the ceasefire, but we believe it needs to be supported. Let me be clear about this. Ukraine has the right and the duty as a sovereign nation to defend itself from any threat to its integrity and to ensure law and order on its territory. At the same time, I would like to state that in these circumstances, we should work for a political solution. We need a negotiated settlement that includes international monitoring of the Russian-Ukrainian border, disarmament of illegal armed groups, the withdrawal of Russian forces operating on Ukrainian territory. This must be followed by political reforms that reassure all Ukrainians that they have a place in building a new Ukraine. History teaches us some lessons. It teaches us that those who do not learn from it are condemned to repeat its mistakes. So we cannot sleepwalk into open conflict. But neither should we ignore or appease aggressive behavior. We need to act responsively and decisively. This is why, in the European Union, we have been following what we have called a two-track approach. First, keeping the channels open to achieve a negotiated solution. I can tell you, we spared no effort on this. I have personally been in contact with President Poroshenko and also President Putin several times. In areas under direct responsibility of the European Commission, we are actively mediating trilateral talks on issues such as the deep and comprehensive free trade area and also on energy. We are ready to listen also to Russia's concerns, but we will not abdicate our principles and values. Secondly, we need to send a clear signal to Russia that its behavior has costs. And on this, since the beginning of the crisis, we have taken a number of measures. This includes suspending our political dialogue with Russia, our bilateral cooperation, suspending Russia's participation in the G8, adding people and entities responsible for the annexation of Crimea and the stabilization of the East to a visa ban and asset freeze list, designing a non-recognition policy of Crimea's annexation that we will tighten, and adopting 2 rounds of restrictive measures on arms, dual-use goods, sensitive technologies and financial services. As you know, the European Commission was asked by the European Council, all heads of state and government of the European Union, to prepare these sanctions, and we are happy that the Member States were able to reach unanimity support to those sanctions. But at the same time, we have to be clear, these sanctions are not an end in themselves. They are a means to show to Russia that this situation, we consider it unacceptable. We know that sanctions alone will not solve the problem, but I think they should be seen as a signal of our serious concern and condemnation, and that there will be irreversible damage to the relation with the European Union if this behavior of Russia continues. I said recently that we were quickly approaching a point of no return in this conflict and in our relations with Russia. Let's use the time that's still available for a political solution. And let me tell you what I think could be done. First, the ceasefire needs to be respected. All the conditions attached to it should be fulfilled. Rebels and militias need to disarm, Russian troops withdrawn, independent and international monitoring of the borders put in place. Ukraine also needs to go ahead with the reform of its constitution through a wide national dialogue. It needs to implement decentralization in full respect of Ukrainian sovereignty and adopt an amnesty law. Second, to be able to fully support the stabilization of Ukraine, the European Commission is ready, in the event that Ukraine ratifies the association agreement, to propose additional flexibility. Such flexibility will consist in delaying until the 31st of December 2015 the provisional application of the DCFTA while continuing autonomous trade preference of the European Union to the benefit of Ukraine. I am happy that today, in the trilateral meeting we had in Brussels between the European Commission, Russian government and Ukrainian government, there was broad support to this. Let's see if this can now be the basis for a compromise. On energy, a price for new deliveries of gas should be agreed, past bills settled, an arrangement to have Ukraine as a transit country in the wider European gas network secured. Ultimately, Russia needs to choose if it wants to be a strategic partner or a strategic rival. If Russia chooses the latter path, to be a rival, we would all collectively have to take the political, economic and security consequences. But if it chooses the former, our offer to negotiate a new agreement still stands. This agreement could be an important building block. I know it may sound now utopian or even unrealistic, but I believe we should look in the future for an integrated economic space in the European continent from Lisbon to Vladivostok. We would also be ready to explore options to engage with the customs union. As I have said several times in the past, we are not opposed to regional integration. Actually, we support it. But of course, regional integration must be based on the free will and consent of the parties, and should not be used to advance a new policy of blocs or spheres of influence. Rather, regional integration should lower barriers, facilitate contacts. So I do hope that Russian leadership understands what is at stake and takes the right decisions for the sake of Ukraine, but also for its own sake and the sake of stability in the entire European continent. Let me, ladies and gentlemen, close by sharing with you my vision for the European continent. It is one of openness to all partners and to the world of cooperation, based on common values and principles, free and integrated economies, respect for the free will of the people. It is on this vision that the European Union has built its enlargement policy and its Eastern Partnership. It is on this vision that we have worked all these years to deepen our partnership with Russia and other countries in the region. We have recalled time and again that our relations with our eastern neighbors are not detrimental to their relations with their other neighbors. But we also have to deal with the world as if it is our world. Therefore, the European Union will not accept what we believe from a point of view of values is unacceptable. What will be a risk will be not just Ukraine's independence, but the sustainability, the trust of a multilateral order based on values, equality, and the rule of law. We are committed to Ukraine's unity and to European peace and stability. We are committed to working together for a united Ukraine, an independent Ukraine in a united continent. And let me tell you, to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, because now I'm reaching the final days of my 10 years mandate as head of the European Commission. In 2004, when I started my leadership in the European Commission, the European Union was 15 countries. Today we are 28. So it means that in the middle of all these crises we had in Europe, including the financial and sovereign debt crisis, the European Union was able almost to double its membership. For those who had doubts about the resilience of the European Union, I tell them they were wrong. The European Union has a great resilience. It's a great project for the future. The European Union, I tell you now that I'm leaving the leadership, so I'm more and more independent. I tell you that the forces of integration are stronger than the forces of disintegration. Some people believe that this is true. Some people look at this a little bit cynically. They are wrong. And we are going to prove time and time again that the cynics are wrong, that values and principles matter. And during these 10 years, one of my goals in the European Commission, and with working, of course, not only the Commission but with our member states, has been not only the enlargement of the European Union, and we came to 28 countries now, but also the possibility of spreading stability all over our continent. We have worked for that. And the reality is that we feel a great emotion and identification with Ukraine. One of the distinguished speakers that we saw in this movie said, we cannot offer love, we can only offer law. Let me tell you, I think to Ukraine we can also offer love. I think we should also offer love. Because these moments of heroism of Ukraine, of Maidan, of the young people and not so young people, waving the European flags, these moments we cannot forget, all of us that are living a relatively comfortable life in peace in the other part of our continent. I was 18 years of age when my country became a democracy. So I know, well, what was to live under a dictatorship and what was to live for democracy. And I know very well my generation in Portugal, the same happened at the same time with the generation in Spain or Greece, later with Poland, all Central European countries. We were looking not only for democracy, we were looking to become members of the European family of nations. What I can say today to the Ukrainian friends is, yes, you are not yet at this moment members of the European Union, but we consider you members of the European family of nations, and like that, you have the same rights that any European country. And I believe you should not give up on your objective. I thank you for your attention.
Dear friends, now we have a chance to ask President Barroso maybe for 2-3 questions, and I will use privilege to be moderator, and I will ask first question. Mr. President, your announcement about this compromise which was reached today in Brussels between Ukraine, Russia and European Union, this is sensational. I think this is breaking news. This is really very important for us. And I want to tell you very frankly, 1 year ago, it was my dream to have such agreement before Vilnius summit. And now my question, now we're in a difficult and dangerous situation. Did we have a chance to prevent what happened with a different political strategy of European Union or the West?
Thank you very much for your question. First of all, let me tell you, I'm not here, at least I'm not here yet as a commentator. While I respect very much the opinion of all those that are making analysis, strategic analysis, what could have happened, I'm here expressing the views of the European Commission and on behalf of the European Commission. So I cannot at this moment engage in a, let's say, diplomatic, political analysis that I very much like to make, but it's not the moment. What I can say is the following in terms of principle, and giving also my personal testimony. We had a country, Ukraine, that was asking us not only association agreement, but to become a member of the European Union. And this was not only one government. I've worked at least very actively with three governments, or three presidents, from President Yushchenko, Yanukovych, to now President Poroshenko. And they were asking us to become members of the European Union, or at least have an association agreement. Should we have closed our doors? I mean, was it acceptable that the European Union, because of the big neighbor of Ukraine, should say, no, we cannot discuss with you this? Of course we engaged with Ukraine. This negotiation, contrary to what Russia propaganda says, was very open. It lasted 5 years. All our member states were informed, all of them. They unanimously supported the result in the Vilnius summit. The Russian government was, of course, informed because it's an important neighbor, no problems about it. There were no secret negotiations. But what happened was that at the end, because of pressure from Moscow, the government of Ukraine that wanted the agreement, the government of Mr. Yanukovych wanted the agreement, they initialed the agreement. We have put no pressure. We don't put pressure on our partners. I gave you the example of Armenia. But so I want to say to all those analysts and commentators that pretend that there should be another way, look, in terms of principles, I think it's right that the European Union respects the free will of our partners and that does not accept in Europe a Europe divided on spheres of influence. I think it's right. And so that's what we have done. Commission, but with the support, I repeat, of all our member states. So I think it's not very, for historic, analytical reasons, you can always make all the analysis, and it's insane. But now, to solve the current situation, it's better to focus on what we can do now. And what we can do now is to ratify the association agreement. That's an historic moment. I hope it will be ratified on Tuesday. By the way, simultaneously by the Ukrainian Parliament and the European Parliament. And we can address some of the concerns, namely concerns of Ukraine. Ukrainian government has expressed to us, and the Ukrainian president, concerns regarding the implementation now of DCFTA because of the difficult economic situation we are living in this country. So we are going to continue. This is the proposal of the Commission. We are going to continue to offer Ukraine unilateral trade measures so your products, your service can come to the European Union. At the same time, we are going to suspend the entry into force of the liberalization part on your side. I think this is once again a great demonstration of solidarity. I hope that all member states of the European Union will accept this. What was achieved today, it was in a meeting between the Commissioner for Trade of the European Union, so Commissioner Karel de Gucht, and the Minister from Russia and the Minister from Ukraine, was an agreement that now has to be, of course, validated by all our member states. But I think it's a realistic way of having the association agreement that was a strategic goal of Ukraine, also the strategic goal of the European Union, and to have it without major difficulties in implementation, hopefully without retaliation from Russia, and at the same time, of course, trying to address the specific concerns now expressed by the Ukrainian side. So I believe that our position has been consistent and right. And my invitation to all the analysts that think otherwise is to ask them to think about what is good and it was bad. The behavior of the European Union was good. The behavior of those that wanted Ukraine to decide on its own, that was bad. So let's not mistake in analytical terms what was fundamentally good and fundamentally bad. The position of the European Union has been fundamentally correct. The positions of those who do not accept Ukraine to decide on its own future, this is the wrong position. This is fundamentally bad.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Anders Aslon, Peterson Institute of World Economy from Washington.
Thank you very much. President Barroso, let me follow up a bit more on Viktor Pinchuk's question, because this is really key. And you have two alternative versions here. Most clearly, we heard it from President Putin's economic advisor, Sergei Glasiev, in Yalta a year ago. He said, we, Russia, were not consulted. We were not informed. This is outrageous. Now we do whatever we do. And at the same time, I've heard from you, and as you put it now, and from many representatives of the European Union, we have biannual summits with Russia. We have more summits with Russia than with any other country. Russia could raise it at any time, and until last summer, they did absolutely nothing. Could you elaborate on this? You have been at all these summits for the last decade. Did President Putin or President Medvedev raise this problem? And was there a serious discussion about it, or did they just forget it? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very clear question, and Sire, thank you very much. The reality is that during all these years, the Russian side has never objected, except very much in the end. After the initialing of the agreement, only then the President of the Russian Federation expressed some kind of objections to what has been negotiated between us and Ukraine. Secondly, it's absolutely false that Russia was not informed about our negotiations with Ukraine. It's a lie. It could not be clear. First of all, they knew everything that was going, and we gave, at different levels, information. Because, I have to tell you, very sincerely, that our goal was never to create problems with a country like Russia. Why should we? We have no interest in that. And by the way, we don't think it's useful also for Ukraine to have this confrontation. You are right. Russia, during all these years, was the country with which we had more high-level contacts. And this is the irony of the situation. President Putin was the foreign leader I met the most, so except the European Union leaders, during these 10 years. At least I had 25 meetings with President Putin. Some in those summits, formal summits, afterwards during some time with President Medvedev, but even during this time, President Putin visited Brussels as Prime Minister of Russia. I went to Moscow. So it was not because of lack of contacts. This is simply false. The reality is that Russia, that said at the beginning that there was no objection to Ukraine association agreement with European Union, they said more. Russia said there is no objection to Ukraine becoming a member of the European Union. Let's not forget that. At the same time, they were expressing their opposition to Ukraine becoming a member of NATO. That's true. That was the consistent position of Russia, opposition of Ukrainian membership in NATO. There was not opposition of Russia to Ukraine association with the European Union and even Ukraine membership of the European Union. I had several talks with President Putin when he said, I see no objection at all. I did not ask his permission, by the way, but he said it. So what happened was a change of the position. And now I leave it for the analysts, and I know among you there are very brilliant scholars and analysts and experts, much better than me. I just have the practical side of it. To leave why the Russian position changed. Because it changed, effectively. And this is important for the record. That's why I'm saying it publicly so clearly. It's completely false that there were not information. By the way, Russian, and now I'm giving you a clue for an answer, Russia negotiated the customs union with the partners also without giving us information. We could say, as Russia says, we are a neighbor of Europe, we should be informed. We can also say, if you make an association agreement, a customs union with Belarus and Kazakhstan and others, we should know the details. We have not been informed. So the reality is that there was a change in the position of Russia regarding the possibilities of Ukraine becoming closer to the European Union. And this is obviously related to the goals of creating the Eurasian Union that came at a certain moment in the, let's say, thinking of the leadership in Moscow. But I don't think this is a reason for us or for Ukraine to change. This is a reason also to reassure Russia that we have nothing to hide, that we believe that trade can be a win-win situation, and we really believe that it's in the interest of all the European continent to have the association agreement between Europe and Ukraine.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And maybe last third question. Igor Jurgens, Russian Federation.
Mr. Barroso, thank you very much. I participated in a couple of meetings of you with Mr. Medvedev, for whom I worked as an advisor, and then to Mr. Putin. I can tell you that I fully agree with you. Russia knew from A to Z what's happening between you and Ukraine. And not sometimes through you, but through Mr. Yanukovych, who was shuttling between you and us, offering different deals. And that absolutely confused Russian public. It did confuse the Russian public. Those who question me, I can tell you 100%. Mr. Yanukovych was trying to sell you one story and then to sell the different story. And this was a disgusting play of Mr. Yanukovych, and that was not right to do that. But I can tell you one thing. Back in 2008, I was the consultant of a number of people in Brussels saying that Eastern Partnership is not done right. Eastern Partnership, when you said that we will negotiate with a number of border countries of Russian Federation, ex-allies of Russian Federation, we will negotiate special agreements. There was no objection on the Russian side, but there was a proposal in case of Ukraine, as you know, that probably we can negotiate something trilateral? The answer was no, outright no, because there is no such format. As Mr. Franco, as an ambassador to Russia, and myself was informed, there is no such format as the third party negotiating something which we negotiate with Ukraine.
Igor, sorry, can you formulate your question?
Finally, what happened today is exactly what Russia wanted to do before the crisis. If we did it before the crisis, probably there was no crisis. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's a very important statement you have made, because you are from Russia Federation, and you have been in some of those meetings, and I think what you said is very important, because you have confirmed, being present in some of those meetings, that in fact Russia was informed of the association agreement that we were negotiating with Ukraine. It is important because there has been some campaign of misinformation made in Moscow, I'm sorry to say it, suggesting that this was not the case. So it's very important to have an authoritative voice coming from the Russian authorities saying this. And this is the first point. The second point, you are also right when you say that at a certain moment Russia proposed a trilateral negotiation. We have refused. Yes, it's right. I don't think that the European Union was invited when Russia negotiated, for instance, with Kazakhstan. I don't think, and I believe Russia has the right to negotiate with the countries they want. But Russia has also to recognize the right of Ukraine to negotiate the agreements they want. That is the point. So if the European Union accepts as a condition to negotiate a trade agreement that a third party has to be present, in that case, we will be accepting the theory of spheres of influence or a kind of limited sovereignty of a country that is dependent, that is Ukraine. This is why we did not accept. But at the same time, we were proposing Russia and Ukraine to have trilateral talks on energy, to look at the problems there is in the transmission of energy in Ukraine, and that was never accepted by our Russian partners. Because this is another thing. One thing that's a very important nuance. One thing is to accept that a third country has a kind of a veto in a trade agreement between two parties. Another thing is to accept a third country to discuss practical modalities of implementation of that association agreement. That we can do, and in fact it was the European Commission. We have offered, and I'm happy to have offered it, well, of course with agreement with all member states. Let's see what are the problems. If Russia has some issues with the CFTA, we can perfectly discuss in a civilized manner. At the same time, we can also discuss implementation of energy. So we agree with this. What we cannot accept is that we have to have a permission of a country to negotiate a free trade agreement with another one. And these nuances, as you know, make an important difference. But today, as you know, I said there was an interesting agreement in Brussels. Let's hope that this is now going to be accepted by the leadership of all the parties. We have still to, of course, to see this with our member states, because the Commission is negotiating on behalf of the 28 countries. But I believe this offers some hope. I believe that it's important to have a comprehensive settlement that, of course, first of all addresses the issues of the ceasefire and the borders and sovereignty of Ukraine, but where we can have a constructive relationship and avoid a situation that will be detrimental for Ukraine, but also for all of Europe. But I thank you for your very important testimony. Thank you.
Mr. President, thank you very much. I know that there are many people who want to ask questions, but I think now time to finish our conversation. Only I can give you a small portion of optimism. We have preliminary agreement with President that when he will have a little bit more freedom to talk, maybe next time he will attend our meetings and maybe he will give you even more answers. But thank you very much for your really very interesting, very deep speech and answers. For us it was a great honor, and this is a great signal for Ukrainians. Thank you very much, Mr. President.